Howdy. Okay. Hello, Paul. Thank you, Paul. Or Paula. Might be Paula, sorry. Whoop, I gotta focus this. Advance autofocus. Turn that off. I usually do this beforehand, but I'm running a little bit late, so I'm just gonna make sure this is as focused as possible. And pull back out. Okay. So, started into this style of art. How did I? Simplifying things as best I could. I went to school for graphic design, and I like the idea of simplifying a concept into its core components in a way that quickly and directly conveys an idea as best as I can in a short period of time or something. But I also like hand-drawn things, the aesthetics of things being visually being as clear and direct with what it's describing without trying to hide any of the process. I'm a big fan of what process looks like and how it functions. This brush is a little bit dirty. I got into animation from liking cartoons and then wanting to know how things function. I'm just going to do a face loop today. I'm going to make it a little bit more exaggerated lengthwise. But simplifying things into more sort of graphic elements, something that I really enjoy doing, and translating that to faces, because faces are sort of the thing that I find that you can abstract more than anything else and still successfully convey a great deal of emotion and connection on things, convey a lot of things in a simplified manner. So if I focus on faces, then I can abstract them to a greater degree. Make this one. I'm glad that you enjoy it. Virus Oceanico. Just gonna have some tea, that's what I'm doing over here. Started a little bit late because I drank all my tea before starting, and I was talking to some folks, FaceTiming with some friends. And then my doctor's office today opened at 3, so I was trying to call and see if I could either make an appointment for today or in the near future to get a flu shot. So I got delayed there. So now I got to figure out what I want to do with this. Trying to think of some movements or stuff that I've had in the past that I appreciate. I'm actually going to tighten in on this a little bit so that you get a better picture of what I'm doing, because this is going to stay pretty stationary. Thank you, Vachit. Actually, what tools do I use right now? I'm using a pretty cheap brush that, yeah, that's what. I bought a bunch of cheap brushes from Amazon. Not the best place, but I go through brushes a lot because I don't take care of them, but I don't need them to be perfect. I just need them to be decent. And then Sumi ink tracing paper. I gotta figure out what I want this face to do. I might try to force it to separate a bit, because I like doing that, and I haven't in a minute. So, to do that, I'm gonna start by sort of pulling this just a little bit further to a side and distorting the middle section a tiny bit. I'm just going to leave this frame just as is up top. Sorry, not completely as is, but I'm not going to start illustrating. I'm going to make this break apart in the middle, but that would only... I am using OBS to broadcast, send a stream out, and then something called Yellow Duck to send that stream to Instagram Live. So now we get to, as something stretches, you have to conceive of the fact that if you're taking this same area of the face and you're stretching it in this direction, you have to start to squish it, to compress it in the middle a little bit. So as this is starting to pull out, these top and bottom sections are going to start to compress a little bit. That overall shape change is going to continue in the other aspects of the face. Depends where you are with your animation, what processes you're using and such. Say just look at things that you like and see about trying to emulate them, practice, try different frame rates, see how changing up where you have if you're doing it more traditionally, where your keyframes end up, and what your keyframes are, or your in-betweens. I remember seeing a post that was talking about creating more interesting movements by adjusting what your in-betweens, what your tween frames are. So in that case, it was just the example was like, I'm not going to do a great job with this, but it was like, if you have your keyframe here, and then your next keyframe is like a closed hand. It's like this. Your in-between frames don't have to be just the logical step. That's this turning this way, like that. You could make it exaggerated or twisted. It doesn't have to be necessarily a straightforward in-between. Even if you're doing like, I'll try and simplify this actually, because once I started to that, realized I was doing weird bits. There's a lot of different ways that you can transition from point A to point B. It doesn't have to just be middle point averaged. It could be something that's exaggerated and odd. Could be several. Look at what was it, animation smears, stuff like that. Look at the more cartoonish elements of things, and thank you, Lucy Cat. Bad at guessing names, especially for people who are or messaging internationally. I am not the best at reading names cold. But there's a bunch of different ways that you can convey the same amount of time, but express it completely differently. And so you can start making weirder choices, more extreme choices, but they all have different impacts on what the overall motion conveyed ends up being. I'm generally pretty straightforward with maybe a little bit of smears and stuff. Thank you, Augustina. I also tend to go straightforward, like as people sort of think of how animation would be done. That's sort of how I tend to actually go about stuff. Oh, Lucy. Hello, Lucy. Or Lucy Kate. A lot of time animation is done. So what I typically do with these, I am double checking I'm recording because I forgot to record yesterday. What I do is I will record this. I'll post a time-lapse version of it on Instagram, because if I'm doing the way that I'm broadcasting, I can't save the live because it's just through a program. I don't have that interface to replace it, but I'll post a time-lapse version of this, a sped-up version, where you can see the animation sort of forming. Faces morphing is going to stretch out this way and break apart. And then I also post the full real-time version to a YouTube channel, which is just TraceLoops. You should be able to find it if you just search TraceLoops. There's not much vying for that. And then I'll post a version of this animation. But Instagram doesn't allow for IGTV videos to be uploaded that are longer than 30 minutes, I think, is where it caps out. If you want to look at previous live streams, except for yesterday's because I forgot to press record, those are all up on my YouTube channel. There's, I'm not sure, like 30 hours of stuff, if not more. So this is where I'm planning on splitting it. I'm doing okay. Hope your inking is going well. Now this is gonna pull further. Get a little bit more squared off at the bottom. That's fine, I was late starting. You don't have to be here every day on the dot. That's a lot of commitment. I can barely keep up with it. I use Photoshop. This is for fun and to produce content as self-promotion, and I'll do some version of this animation, put it on a shirt that people can buy. And that's at traceloops.com/store. I've been doing designs from daily things to then post up and make available for purchase on shirts. If you're outside the US, you can direct message me and I'll work with you to get a shirt to you. There's just a big difference in shipping costs for international things, and how my storefront is set up. It's just a base cost. So it's mostly self-promotional things. I need to ship some stuff or pack it up. I got distracted this morning and didn't make it out in time, but I need to send a couple things that people have purchased. I've gotten tripped up a little bit by doing more work that, or having more products that are fulfilled by a printing company, which means that I don't have to deal with stuff nearly as much, which is nice, but it also means that when people order things that I personally have to ship, that sometimes I lose track of things a bit, because I've gotten used to it being fulfilled by a different company. Should wait to do that till later. Trying to let this dry out a bit so that it doesn't stick to the next frame. I think it might be a little bit more humid here because it rained yesterday, and it's not quite cold enough to have the heat be going. Next frame. Number that one? Yeah, okay. So as this is stretching a bit more, it's getting a little bit more cartoonish with the motion. I've spent enough time to get better at sort of winging it. I have an idea as I'm moving forward. I've done a very similar animation before, and I've spent a decent amount of time learning a bit for myself what sort of pacing takes place, how to accelerate and decelerate. You have to try and mess up sometimes. You might find something new that was unexpected. It's a mix here. I haven't had any that like have really failed for stuff that I've made on live streams, but when I have, it's usually a still, so I just toss it and start again. Thank you. Glad you enjoy them. In college, I started getting some work for animation, and so I sort of just kept it going. Hello, Adrian. This is an animation of a face pulling apart, and then it'll come back together for the end of the loop. So right now it's separating out and creating these sort of tendril? I don't know if that's the right word, but these are like sort of sticky bits that are holding out. And now I need to, as this gets a little bit longer and a little bit thinner in the middle with some of those ending spots, it's got to hold for a second and then pop. So right now we're getting a little bit closer, but I need to have this. You can see the previous frames. Like here, it's a little bit closer to here, then it's a little bit wider. I don't know if you can see further back in the animation the difference between this and the previous frame is almost negatable. It's very little. Then it gets a little bit more and a little bit more, and then it's pushing out in some different spots, and it's keeping about the same pace. Now it's a lot because it's trying to, that increase is accelerating. So now I need to have it decelerate because it's sort of like boom, boom, pop. So I need to keep this moving away, but decrease the change from the previous frame. can stay about the same. This guy can get a little bit more animated by having a stronger sense of a pull happening. This ink is Sumi ink. This is Yasutomo Sumi ink. Try and draw it in a way that sort of illustrates that sense of being pulled, which means that the tension has to be pulling away from this middle bit. And I'll draw a couple frames of that. This can get bigger and more elongated, as can this guy, and the one up top, but not quite as extreme. I don't know how many frames this will be. This will probably be somewhere between 15 and 30 frames. But I'm not sure, because it has to continue separating out. This is Sumi ink, not paint, but I've talked about it on previous live streams. I don't technically know the difference between ink and paint. Like, there's a thought behind it, but then if you get into like printing inks, they get very viscous. Because in my mind, paint is thicker than ink, more viscous. And then I'm like, well, maybe it's what it's based out of. It's like, well, you can have oil-based ink and water-based ink, and you can have acrylic ink, and I don't actually know technically what the difference is. I tried to figure out at some point, and all I could find is people are like, yeah. Sometimes it seems like it might be intent or just general understanding of purpose, but I don't know what the difference between paint and ink technically is. Thanks for watching. Hello, Goyo. Probably here. I don't know what sort of construction they're doing on the street, but you can hear some machines beeping and such. Using Yellow Duck and OBS to broadcast. I've tried growing a mustache. I did with quarantine stuff. Not the best look for me. I also can't grow very strong facial hair. I tried growing out like a beard, but it just looked like I forgot to shave for a while. Just kind of how it looked anyway, but I could grow a mustache, so I did for a bit. I don't think I have any live streams where I got a mustache, but some of these need to start popping, I think. Next step, let's have, how should this pop? Should it be all at once? I think it should be like, this is the tension. It starts in the middle. I think I'm just gonna have it start popping a bit. Top first. The worst that can happen. Thank you, Gianna, or Jaffa, Jotham? I'm not sure how to say your name. Apologies. I can't click that link right now. Sorry. Glad you found it. I'm getting a few more followers from posting reels and such. There's one reel I posted recently that's been getting traction. I don't know how it works within algorithm stuff, but it hit. Frame 10. So now we are at 2/3 of 1 second of animation. You can try animating. I'm not gonna stop you. I like working with music, but I can't do music with lives now. They made it so they're more aggressively going to take down or stop lives that have copywritten music playing in them. Also, it means that I can't upload these to YouTube as full process videos if they were to have music playing. I like some country music. I really like Townes Van Zandt. It's a personal favorite. Hank Williams. Don't listen to a crazy amount of like pop country. Yeah, I didn't feel like you were being creepy. I'm putting myself out there in a way I can't be upset if people are responding to it in a positive way, especially. It's a learning process for me, what it means to be this sort of available, and whether or not at some point I learn to resent it, I won't know until face that sort of deal. But as it is, I have typically pretty respectful audience as far as people who enjoy the work. Mostly I don't want people to take things too seriously or create any sort of feeling that I'm more a thing or something. There's a weird relationship that can form between an audience and a person, because a lot of the time it's sort of like one person represents things for a great number of people, and depending on how you interact with that figure, you can create a sense of a relationship, which isn't bad outright, but it can be sort of a weird mix of vulnerability and who's aware of what of the other person. And also there tends to be a lot of curation for people as to what they share and how they present themselves in a public space. And that can lead to people having a skewed view of who that person is in their personal life and actions. And make it so people have this feeling of what this person is that's not necessarily accurate, because you're interacting with the story of the person more so than the person themselves. I was just realizing that everybody's a person, celebrities or otherwise. There are people who are weirder, and being a celebrity seems like it would be an absurd life to live. The relationships that people build with figures can be odd. So, yeah, I was just talking for a minute there. Something that I've learned as I've gotten older and had some interactions with some people that have some sort of following or something, that the people who seem to be happiest are the people who've just largely removed themselves from things and don't obsess over it as much. And that might mean less success in the sense of having a less committed audience or just a different audience. Those people tend to, keeping things at arm's length, tend to seem to help with the experience of things. Some people love being celebrities, but that's not the sort of deal that I think I'd ever have. Yeah, being at peace is an important thing, I think. Thanks for watching my videos. If you want to watch them not live, you can watch them on YouTube uh, except for yesterday's where I forgot to record. I'm gonna check like 20 times this time and make sure I'm recording, because yesterday what I did was I was like, oh, I'm still getting set up. I'm gonna stop recording and then start again. And then I forgot to start again. But YouTube, there's a bunch on there if you want to just watch the work happen. It's a little bit odd because I don't have the comment section on, so if you're watching it for a sense of interaction, it's going to be like hearing someone talk on the phone. I saw something not too long ago that was asking people of like a generation younger than me, Gen Z, because I'm a millennial, how they mime holding up a phone, and there's not the same relationship that people have younger, because no one really has home phones in the same way, and you don't have that visual of the receiver and the earpiece in the microphone, and so it's interesting seeing that when I was like talking on the phone. I forget why I said that, but because the YouTube versions of these are one-sided because you can't see the comments. I'd call people more than I did when I was younger, actually, just because a lot of the time, or there are some people who I interact with who are just like, I'm just going to call you because we'll be texting and it takes like 10 minutes to explain something. Or it takes like 1 minute on the phone. I've always just gotten more comfortable with talking on the phone. But I do more FaceTime nowadays since I've been in a good sense of isolation for a minute. Inspiring artwork, I try to simplify stuff and get a clear sense of like understanding what it is I feel when I look at something or see something, and breaking things down into their components helps with that. Animation, you have to break it down into these separate little pieces. To know what it is that you're looking at or feeling. Sometimes the work is that I see something and I just want to know how it works. Breaking it apart and remaking it, repurposing the elements. Hello, Zian. The ones that I always go for that are older artists are Norman McLaren. Norman McLaren was a Scottish-born, I believe, animator, but most of the work that he did was through the National Film Board of Canada, which has a lot of impressive things that they funded. But he did a lot of experimentation with what tools he had and sort of repurposing them. So Norman McLaren, just experimental film guy, animator. He did a lot of different kinds of work that took advantage of whatever materials and tools that he had, sort of solving problems of sorts. And then there's a graphic artist sculptor, Shigeo Fukuda, who I really like. He did a lot of these things where he would just do a slight reimagination of a graphic illustration, and it would completely recontextualize it or repurpose it. He was inspired a lot by people like M.C. Escher, who worked with math to recontextualize artwork and have these shapes interact with one another. There's something that I really like that I'll sacrifice a piece of paper for it. Shigeo Fukuda has some, I'll do a couple different illustrations. He had this one very simple graphic poster that's of a cannon with a projectile. This isn't going to be the best example, but this large cannon, and it's just a large poster with a cannon and a projectile that's going into the cannon. And I think the title of it was like Peace or something, but just these simple illustrations that aren't that difficult to create as far as technical elements are concerned, but concept-wise it's very strong and easy to convey. But the thing that I was going to show that I've probably played with more as an idea is he has this illustration of a dog. It's a dachshund, and it's a simple sort of like dog going like this, but what he did was here, I'll spell out Norman McLaren. The dog is not Norman McLaren. Norman McLaren and Shigeo Fukuda was a Japanese. They have both since passed. Shigeo Fukuda. Oh, let's slide that down a little. Can you read that? But something that Shigeo Fukuda did is he cut up images and repositioned them, realigned them, which has a little bit more of a relationship to someone like M.C. Escher, who would do optical illusions, stuff like that. So then you can play with the identity of the dog and how it's perceived and what the illustration is and where the form implied by the line begins and ends. And play with like this little sort of optical illusion. This little dog that's offset this way. He also had some instances where it was a little bit more exaggerated. Where if all you're doing is playing with the positioning of where these lines end and begin, you don't have to really adhere to any of the physical limitations of what this creature is. You can now completely distort it. And you still have this implication of a dog, but now it's much more playful and distorted, and it's the form of it is implied by a line, but conceptually the actual like physical, the mass of this dog is it's unclear where it begins and ends and where it's been shifted around and such. So I really like these sorts of simple shifting of images and such. He also had some illustrations where it would be like legs kicking up, and then the downstroke of the leg would start into a separate leg that might have a different shoe on it, and it's sort of playing with various optical illusions. But it would be like a line of can-can or something like that. And I'll show you, I believe I still have this shirt around. Here it is. This animation, or this walk cycle that's on a shirt, is inspired by Shigeo Fukuda, where when you look at it, initially what you see is you just see a figure that's standing, but it's actually offset the legs and the figure's upper half. And this is a walk cycle. So if you advance this over one, the leg starts to move forward, and then this one, I think actually I have this backwards. So as it goes this direction, it's walking forward. But it's offset. So it's playing with that and then repurposing it for an animated situation. So those are two guys that I'm real big into. And then contemporary, I got friends and such. I've got a friend Zolek, a friend Sam Cannon. I talked to them earlier today. They work in different fields. Or Hayden does more direct animation, but he does 3D animation. Sorry, Zolek. And Sam does more video work, photography with some motion thrown into it. We're all sort of outside of standard definition bits or standard practices. I got into this work. I first did animation in middle school. I don't know if you're American or something else or what terminology you have, but that would have been like 12 years old, I think. Maybe young, I forget. Right on the cusp of middle school stuff was when I got more into animation using Macromedia Flash. I did that with some friends and such. Sorry, I'm getting distracted trying to make sure I get this line going decent. So that's where I sort of first messed around with animation, then some flip books and such. That was the first hand-drawn animation I ever did, was just stick figures running into walls, stuff like that. My mom's an art teacher, but no one in my family has done animation, really. That's my thing. No one else can have it. No, and then I got more back into it when I started messing around with animated GIFs. In college, which was a lot of glitch stuff primarily. And then I started trying elements of rotoscoping. I did not know what rotoscoping was, but I knew it was a technique where you trace over all the stills, and historically it would have been film projected onto a frosted screen, but in the case of me, it was tracing paper clipped onto a laptop. But there's different ways that you can use it. I don't know what the familiarity is with people a little bit younger, but Take On Me was a big rotoscoped thing, and that's where a lot of people's major reference point is for that technique. The Take On Me by Aha, that music video that incorporates live action and rotoscoping. It combines the two. There was a Lord of the Rings film series. Used a lot of rotoscoping. Not the more recent one, but they would have used rotoscoping as a technical element at different points. Because depending on who you talk to, if you say rotoscoping, they'll have not contradicting, but different understandings of what you mean by it. Because a lot of people who work in film, I do have merch. If you go to traceloops.com/store, it'll pop up. Also in, not the reels, but in video, if you press those, it should link out to it. If you are not based in the United States, DM me and I'll work with you. It'll be probably a little bit pricier, depending on what you're purchasing. It'll range from about $5 more to up to about $20 more. Depends on shipping. I have a number of things that more recent stuff that I've made is fulfilled by a printing company, and those are easier to ship internationally because the company has locations in different areas. I'm getting all over the place. This sort of animation is this slow. This is not necessarily reflective of all animation. A lot of people work in pencil and do tests that are looser. But then if you're going like traditional, it would then be inked onto cells to celluloid to film to plastic bits, and those would then be painted on the back by people inking things, which that process takes teams and teams of people and time and effort, and it's expensive and very slow. There are different shortcuts with different forms of animation. This is also a little bit faster of frame rate than what a lot of animation is. Most standard animation nowadays is closer, or historically, sorry, I'm all over the place a little. Okay, animation is usually 12 frames per second if you're doing hand-drawn stuff, but it can bump up to 24. This is a weird sort of in-between space that I exist at, which is 15 frames per second. But part of the appeal of cells in animation of those plastic sheets is that you don't redraw everything. You create cells where it's maybe the hand is the only part that's moving, so you have something that's a still bit, and just have the hand moving or something. So all you're actually animating, you're not redrawing the entirety of the scene. You're just redrawing the section that is moving, which is why in older animations you can guess what's going to move visually because it has a different quality or a different look to it. Like you're like, I can tell that section of the animation is, or that like gate is going to open because suddenly it looks different, and that's because it would be painted onto a piece of plastic and then placed on top of a background. So those would usually be 12 frames per second. I'm working at 15 frames per second. That's just the frame rate where I found I was most comfortable, and that is largely because when I was sort of cutting my teeth, which I both do and don't like as a phrase, when I was starting into things and getting more comfortable with it, I was rotoscoping footage that was a 30 frames per second, and I just cut it in half because that is a lot. It's half the work to just do 15 frames per second, and that's the sort of pacing that I got used to. Okay, now I'm going to start getting closer to where I want to be looping back. So I'm going to get rid of these in between frames and see where I'm moving towards. More recently, it's a mix of what I'm making. Animations I've been doing less frequently. I've been doing more just stills for trying to make merch stuff. But I've been doing one daily for a bit. My work and pace shifts a bit depending on what work I'm doing that's paid work. If I'm doing more paid work, then I'm trying to find a balance. I haven't been doing these daily for too long, but about a month now. I skipped a couple times where I was sick for one of them, and then because I had been sick for a day or two, I was behind on work that I had committed to before I got sick. And so I skipped 2 days the last month or so, but try to do 7 in a week. There was a month a while ago where I was doing these every day. It's a little bit different with live streaming because there's a different accountability, but the pacing is shifted a bit as well. It's a little bit slower producing things when I'm animating for an audience, and I'm trying to keep things visually present consistently. It's a little bit easier to work when I can shift things a bit more. Some stuff I can't do on camera necessarily. And so it's a learning process for me to get into it, but try to do 7 things a week. 1 every day. As best as I can. There's a bit of repetition in what is produced as a result, because sometimes I'm learning or experimenting with something, and other times I have a clear idea of what it is that I want to try and accomplish. Beep, beep, beep. And so, still not super used to this as a process or habit, but I've gotten a lot more comfortable with it as I've been working on these things. So now these guys are coming back together. And the distortions that have taken place, I gotta sort of fake it a bit as these are coming back together. Part of the motivation in trying to do these daily is the idea that I create new designs for shirts and such every day. but not wanting to have my store be too crowded with stuff, I've been cycling those out every 14 days or so. I primarily do black and white. It's very uncommon for me to do other colors. It's where I'm comfortable, and I like the aesthetic, and that it forces me to sort of find solutions for conveying space a little bit more so. And what the feelings of existence and such are. It's also cheaper. 18, now I need to start referencing back a little bit more so to the frame that I'm trying to loop into. I skipped one. Darn it. I need to redo some stuff. When did I stop doing the bottom lip? Pretty far back. Okay. Realize that I started omitting this bottom lip. So I need to add that back into these guys. I just didn't realize that I had missed it. This is a homemade board, but peg bar will pop up with stuff, or if you look at like animation tools or traditional animation tools, you should be able to find some. This is one that I just made myself so that I could use a standard 3-hole punch holes into paper more easily than you can buy more expensive versions of stuff that are a little bit better in different capacities. It's just me fixing my own. I omitted these lower lip bits accidentally. Something of an example of how easy it is to sort of lose track of what it is you're doing. Okay. $17, $18, I need to do this guy. That's number 2. Okay. Okay. Now we're back. Okay. Hello, Marine. I get no, ink my hands pretty frequently. I'm going to take a little break in a moment to go and use the bathroom. Because I've been working for coming up on 2 hours. I drank tea, about 2 cups of tea, and a glass of soda. So I am getting close to needing to be using the bathroom, but I'm just going to leave this running for that little bit of time, and I'll be back within a few minutes. But I think this is the last frame I'll have of the animation. But then I'm going to come back and fill in the solids. Yes. Bathroom time. I'm drinking some jasmine green tea. Right now, I don't know what time zone you're based in, but I am in the US. I'm going to do a quick thing where I make it so you can see the time lapse later on. So I'm going to just go through all of the stills as outlines. It's 4:47 p.m. or 16:47. Doing this bit, and then I'm gonna fill in the black areas, which might take a minute because I'm gonna have to switch brushes back and forth because the smaller areas on this, I don't think the chisel brushes that I have, the angular shaders, are gonna be in a great enough, very good condition for what it is I'm planning on doing. Okay. Need to widen this angle. Which of these is in the best condition? Maybe this one. Use the one I was using here. Because this is an animation, I'm filling it in with ink so that the texture of the paper comes through. Which isn't as noticeable when it's a still doesn't translate as much. The digital process I show partially because a good portion of it is just scanning. There's a good chance I get tripped up by some of this in a minute or two. Once I'm done filling in the solids, which will probably be another 20 to 30 minutes. It's going to get slower than faster than Thank you. But most of the digital process is going to be scanning and cropping. Potentially realigning a tiny bit. Because sometimes when I scan, the paper doesn't line up correctly, or when I was outlining, I didn't quite get it aligned either. But with all of these little circles that I gotta be careful of, this process is gonna slow down. This face sort of deal, a few years. If I were to get out my old sketchbook, I could give you an actual date, probably, of the first time I drew this sort of figure. Hello, Demi. I feel bad. I know that I've clarified your name and such. Drawn this face. Not since college. I think like 2014 or something. Like 5 years or so. No, it would be 2015 or later, I think. I'll eventually use Photoshop and probably Premiere, but I'll be using Premiere because I'm just going to grab everything, including the recording of this stream, and edit that down there because Premiere is much better for that than you could do it in Photoshop, but it would be a terrible experience. Maybe you can. It would be a lot of workarounds. Hello, art is the new life. And here's where I got to be thinking a little bit more, because I have more sections where I start to have these bubbles, but I gotta remember what the intention is. It's less interesting to paint in Photoshop, but it also doesn't create these paper textures. You can try to fake it, but it's going to look bad. Or at least it won't look right to me. It's either all or none is sort of how I try to work. Is like it's either all done one way, or the reason it's done a certain way is because it creates an aesthetic or a style, or it conveys some facet of the process. And if you're trying to recreate it digitally in a way that isn't taking advantage of the digital process, And then it's just sort of like, why? I don't. It's not my. I like there to be sort of a purpose to why something is done the way that it is. I'm not sure what Nakim is. Nakim? This is going to be 23, I believe. 23. I'm on 11. These are going to speed up a bit once I get a few more frames in, because I won't have to deal with the sort of textural bits on these edges. Okay, now I get to get back into these guys. Hello, Grace. Getting closer. Also going to be moving a little bit faster because, as you can see, the edge of the black section of the face is getting smoother. So the required detail is decreasing significantly at this point. Oh, okay. How are the fires? I think I tried to check to see if stuff got delivered, but it said it was inaccessible. But I don't think I checked today. Hope you stay safe. Sorry you haven't gotten your shirts yet. That's good. warming zone is a little bit more of a frightening statement if you're dealing with wildfires than it would be for a different sort of natural disaster. Really wash this brush. Getting closer. Brush. This one does look like a bone at this point. I thought that when I was filling it in. It'll have that for another frame, and then it will lighten up on that sort of look to it. Almost done with this portion. I do not have any pets. I like pets. Before things were pandemic sorts of times, I was pet sitting intermittently for some folks. My mom has a dog and a cat. I like the dog. I'm okay with the cat. The ink is Sumi ink. Sumi is the like general kind, and then the brand is Yasutomo. That's I can't see. I think it's out of focus. Anyway, Yasutomo. Almost done. You're welcome. If you're planning on using it like with watercolors or something, let it dry significantly and test it first. I don't think this is the most waterproof sort of ink. Hello, JCF. Thank you, been worse. Hello, JCF or JC Fab Lab. Oh, Jersey City Fabrication Lab. Okay. Let's try to figure out what it was. This is an animation. I'm on the last frame of filling it in with ink, and then I'm going to let this dry for half a second. And I'm going to place all the frames on here for, yep, I remember, once I figured out what your handle was. Let this dry for a second because I'm going to put stills on top of it because I'm recording this stream, and I'll time lapse stuff at this point and collect all these frames. Now I'm gonna put these in reverse order. So that there's something to look at and show progression when I time lapse this later on, but I want to scan them in order. So that's what's coming next. Oh, I guess this might be 24 frames. I think I wrote 17 down twice. I'm also gonna crop in a little bit. So that I have a better or a closer image of this for the time-lapse bit. These are going backwards down to 1, and I think I have 24 frames total, which makes it a little less than 2 seconds long. Okay, so now we're going to move on to scanning, which is not the most engaging to watch, but it works. So image capture. I already have my scanner hooked up. Overview going. And opt out of that. That's in the right orientation. Now let's go to the folder I will use, 1027-2028. Raw scans, or edited scans. Choose here. Switch this to today's date. This is split head JPEG, and I can use it as just 600 DPI. Okay, so you'll hear the scanner running for 10 minutes maybe as I go through these. cropped in a little, so let's get there. That's fine. Okay, this is 5. Since I was in college, I was doing some sort of animation like this. Not this specifically. So that would have been 7, 8 years ago. I'm scanning them currently. And I breathe on them sometimes because the paper is thin, and sometimes while handling it, it'll curve up from the heat on one side. Makes it more difficult to align when you scan it. But if they're curling down, then they just sort of fall into place. And so if I breathe on them from the backside, then it forces the outside to curve down. And so the forward-facing bit, it's the glass on the scanner more. There's something on here. It's the surface of the scanner better. It's not as necessary if you have thicker paper, but tracing paper is pretty thin. I had that issue more so when I was dealing with smaller pieces of paper, which I don't deal with as much anymore. Here's where I mislabeled. I went from 17 to 17. It's less of an issue when I am animating just frame by frame directly, but sometimes if I'm rotoscoping, I don't know what size this is closest to. I can tell you the size in inches. 9 by 6, I believe. But the paper is 9 by 12. And then I cut it in half so it fits. And that's in inches. This is a non-standard size. don't know where my ruler is, my longer ruler. I don't know where it is. It's somewhere. Figure it out later. Might be buried under all these frames. Number 19. We're getting close. It's almost reveal time. Don't know what it's all end up in. Edit, rename, 1027, split face, and Scout Lab Designs. Named correctly. Photoshop is open. And sorry, something else. Close this out. Close this out, and start up display capture. Oop. Now we're going on there. Files, scripts, load files into stack, browse, unedited scans. Going in order here. Make some noise. Forget if I took cheese, it's back down soon. Getting closer. And here we go. Let's go to 19, throw it to the back. 20, 23, throw it to the back. Create frame animation, make frames from layers. Switch these out. Point oh. Let's reverse these frames. That's your initial view on things. Let me mark out where these go on the extremes. to about here. Down there. Let's crop this for a moment. And change the size. Just make it 1080. Actually, let's crop it just a tiny bit more so that it's Instagram ready. And curves for the sake of display here in the live stream. I'm going to save this as an animated GIF. It's not too terribly large, but I got rid of the paper texture for the time being for the sake of this not being a giant thing. This is face split. And let me open up OBS. Turn off display capture. Get you an image going. Grab the one I'm looking for. Rename. It should be your GIF. And that's what you're looking at. I started with the character, simplifying things based on some masks and such. And then also sort of based off of a barn owl. So a barn owl has a face that sort of goes curved around here and then meets in the middle. There's a lot of masks that simplify faces into nose and brow, and so that's sort of where that comes about. Gracias, Agustina. Gracias para ver. Thank you for to look. Thanks for watching is what I'm trying to say. What do you mean the drop? You can just sort of go through. I can go through some of the stills and sort of show it to you as it's broken down. I'll make this guy little. Put him to a side. So you've got the reference in the corner. And then you don't have to apologize. Okay, so as these are moving, initially it is going a little bit slower. And then it gets a little bit wider, and I'll get a little bit of a better angle here. A little closer. Oop, wrong way. So this starts to separate here in the middle. There's a circle. My stomach is making noises. And then it's ripping a little bit more. So that initial spot, that one little spot there, it's larger here. It's widening, and then you're having additional spaces build up. And then they're all widening a bit more. the first one is more separated than the initial ones, and it just keeps increasing with that, and that's as this face is separating out. So you're having sort of like, I don't know, 15 things happening at once, or maybe 10, because you're... Are we good? Let me make sure. Okay, sorry, my stream cut out for a second there, my preview stream. So let's see if we are on time. Okay. So additional things. So the lips are stretching and getting thinner. The face is stretching and getting down a little bit this way. It's sort of like if you imagine that there's a, it's not 100% accurate, but if there's a set volume or set area for this face, as it's separating this way, as it elongates, it has to shrink, which is true for a bunch of these different elements. So you're decreasing the area or the volume by adding these little sections in there. And as it stretches further, you're compensating both in this direction by decreasing the overall area, and you're adding more negative space here. The lips are stretching and getting thinner as well. So again, just increasing the size. As these increase primarily in this direction, you're also getting thinner connection points. So here it's a little bit thicker, and then they get thinner. And then you continue that on and exaggerate those elements. So it's wider, thinner connections, and it's starting to add more bits here. And then that continues on. It gets more exaggerated in all of those sections. More exaggerated again. And now you're dealing with all of these just thin connection points. And then you start to rip. So in my mind, I decided to have it be at the top and make its way generally down. But something that's the best way to illustrate or convey something looking a little bit more realistic is to have things be less perfect. Things tend to look more tangible the more imperfect they are, because things that are created completely digitally tend to be too perfect. And if you're going for this sort of surreal in-between thing, then you can take advantage of that. But in this case, what I'm talking about or getting towards is if I made this go directly, all of them at the same time or in one sequence after the other, it would look less like actual separation of a physical connection. So in this next one, this one's separating more, and it's contracting back the elements there, and then the ones immediately below it are going sort of in order and separating out. But then there's also this one lower down here that has separated as well. And that sort of helps with the speed of the animation. I don't have to do quite as many frames, but it also helps to make it look a little bit more tangible and real. So now these are starting to sort of shrink back. And if you think about how much physical mass would be in this elongated bit, when it contracts, it'll widen. It'll get thicker at the base. Also, there's a little bit of a sense of gravity going down in this direction. So these pieces that break off, if they're a little bit longer and they're contracting and getting wider, they would also be falling down a bit. And then that continues on. You're getting it flatter and flatter at top. It's spreading out as it's contracting back to this larger mass. These are breaking out of order a little bit. And then it just continues on as it's going down. These are sort of settling, and the texture starts to flatten out at the top, and it's sort of generally making its way down here. Continuing on, same deal. These have all broken. This one falls a little bit further down because it's at the bottom end. Combining in there. And then it's getting smoother and smoother until you don't have any of those residual little textural bits. And now it's starting to come back together, which means that this mass is sort of starting to push in from the outside, is sort of like an accordion or something. And as it's moving, you get a better sense of motion of it combining together if you accelerate unevenly. And so it's accelerating here faster in the middle, so it'll meet at the middle, which is sort of where it started separating, and means that these edges sort of get exaggerated. It's all curving because it's all moving back together. And then it meets, and I decided to leave that separating line there so it's not combining yet. But you'll start to have this middle section sort of flatten out as these sections are still meeting up, because that initial, it's sort of going that direction. And in 2D animation, it's easier to exaggerate those elements and try to work with the feel rather than the actual what it would look like exactly. So now there's no longer an actual split line here. There's less of a concern when you're dealing with the black area. And this section is sort of tailing in here, so where these have met in the middle, they are flattening out significantly, and this is still following through with that sort of bit. Now that it's had all of this energy going here, that mass would be pushing out. So you have sort of two directions of motion and movement happening at this base still, because it hasn't made its way down to meet and connect. So it's pushed out as well as still moving towards this middle section. The eyes are being pushed in this direction too. So everything's sort of moving this way now. So it's coming in, but it's also pushing out. So the lips are further down, the eyes are pushing up, and you imply more of that by changing the curve direction of the eye. Now we finally have the ends meet up together. I could have done a little bit more here to have it transition there. But now it's starting to settle. So then it's going to widen and squish down to try and return back to here. And then you start all over again. And then you get this. So in animation, traditional 2D animation, and it exists in 3D as well, and stop motion, there are some different sort of core elements to the sort of persistence of motion that you can play with. Bounce and stretch, there's a little bit of that here, and follow through is something that's hard to sort of conceive of sometimes, because you're not thinking of just the motion happening from point A to point B. You're thinking about the momentum that continues on. Yeah, so I need to head out in a second. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'll try to answer them in a moment. Otherwise, I'll try to be back tomorrow. I don't know if I'll be doing a full animation. there's a chance that I start late. I have an appointment at noon that I need to go to, but it shouldn't take 3 hours unless there's additional issues. So I'm not going to say definitively I'll be back tomorrow at 3. Knowing what to draw, it's practice messing with things, looking at existing artwork, and I usually envision elements of it. I don't have tutorials. I have sped up. I've got a few that are like quicker versions of these, but when it comes to tutorials, I don't have any for animation. I have some weird ones for like some digital glitching and stuff. If you look up video effects YouTube or like video effects fashion week, then you'll see some VHS stuff that I did. But as far as straight up tutorials, this is the best that I have. I have these full live streams up on my YouTube. I don't have like enough. If you search TraceLoops, it'll come up. Yeah, you can shoot me a DM and I'll try to help you. Let's see, sketches for the animation. Not for this one. I don't have any sketches. To do an animation like this, it has taken me about 3 hours, but that would be a bit faster if I wasn't streaming it, just because there's a little bit more restrictions on movement, placement, and such when I'm streaming, because I'm performing to a degree. But otherwise, if you don't have, I'll give like another minute for questions. I won't be rehashing what I did like for the last 5 to 10 minutes. 3 hours start to finish for this guy. This is, I don't draw or sketch out the animations for most of these. These are just sort of working in direct, one frame following the other. I will post this one to YouTube. I have been recording. So I'll check again, unless there's some weird thing that happens with finishing the recording, because that's a potential issue. I haven't come across it yet, but it is going to be like 4 gigs of footage and 3 hours. Thank you. I don't know if you're following on YouTube or if you're aware of the link. Every now and again I post it here, but if you just search TraceLoops, it should pop up, or TraceLoops live, Instagram Live. I've been trying to be here every day, unless there's some other stuff happening at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, New York time. Sometimes that's a little bit off. Today I started a little bit late because I was calling my doctor to make an appointment to try and get a flu shot and look at some things that I got going on. And then I missed a couple days from food poisoning, and because the food poisoning delayed some paid work that I had. And I will probably be missing out a few days in a couple weeks. But typically trying to be here every day. I'll post this as a full thing where you can see it quickly happening. I'm doing fine. I'm just getting a flu shot and my knee's been bothering me. And so I want to get that checked out. flu shot because COVID stuff's on the rise again, and we're getting into flu season, and it makes sense for me to get a flu shot. But my knee, after I was doing some jump roping earlier on stuff, it doesn't hurt constantly, but if I walk like more than a mile, then it starts to act up and it might be sore for like the rest of the day. So I just better to get it looked at than to just hope it gets better. Yeah. So I'm gonna head out. Thanks for watching. Be back tomorrow. I'll post stuff up soon. Adios.